Welcome back, folks, to Garza Gaitan and the Game, where we go play-by-play on the game of politics. I'm accompanied here by my co-host, Daniel Garza, here, Wadi Gaitan. We got a show ahead. We want to make sure that you guys can subscribe before we continue. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and all of the above. We're on Spotify as well. There's a lot of news coming these last few days, starting with House Republicans moving a very important tax bill that we're going to break down on the show. Also, new information coming out about a Biden town hall that was filmed, that was taped, but never released. We get into the why behind that. Also, the heartbreaking news of an attack where two Israeli staffers were murdered. Someone screaming "Free Palestine" afterwards. Then we go into what many have seen as a win at the border. Yes, there have been movement, but we must understand how the cartel in Mexico is adjusting to the fact that the Trump administration has been taking that war to the border. So stay tuned. A lot going on this episode. Daniel, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling really good, Wadi. This is a good week for Republicans in the game, and they keep racking up the W's. Not such a good week in the game for Democrats.
Very, very much so, Daniel. And to that point, it's a big win because House Republicans, after moving a bill through the committees, look, this is a very important thing. Many people are sort of complaining that this bill was passed at 4 in the morning. You have to remember, this is a bill that was moved first through the Ways and Means Committee. It was then voted in the Budget Committee. Then it was given in the Rules Committee. And this is something the Republicans have been working for months. So when you hear people say that this is a bill that was snuck in through the early hours of the morning and that no one got a chance to read it, that is simply not true. But let's get into the significance of this bill, Daniel. It's something that President Trump has been calling the big, beautiful bill, that it's something that is essential for the economy. One of the key topics of his campaign in 2024 is taking us out of these 4 years of inflation. The reality is in 2026, there was going to be a tax hike if these provisions from 2017 expired. In your opinion, what is the significance of what we saw right now in the House? Why does this bill matter so much?
Yeah, well, first of all, you're right, Wadi, that everybody saw it coming, right? It was announced with fanfare. It's been a centerpiece of an effort by groups like Americans for Prosperity and the Leave It Initiative. My group. It's been promoted and legislated and advocated for, and finally the day arrived when the vote came down. It was a tough one. The Congress is very, very divided at this point, and so I think what strikes me the most is I'd hate to ponder what would have happened if the bill hadn't gone through. It would have been the biggest tax hike in American history. You would have heaped on more costs for Americans to endure, especially the working class who are barely scraping by, after having gone through so much inflation and interest rate hikes and prices up on everything. Thousands, if not millions, of jobs would have been lost as well. So, of course, this bill is significant because it extends the 2019 tax cuts that everybody saw. Don't be fooled. It wasn't just the rich. It was everybody across the board received tax relief. There's now restrictions on food stamps as well. This is a program that is being abused, and taxpayers are footing the bill on that. They're rolling back clean energy programs that have been a boondoggle by those on the center left, on the backs, again, on the working class. Medicaid restrictions as well are included in this, mainly work requirements of those folks who are able-bodied and should be working as they're getting free healthcare or government subsidized healthcare at least. And it includes, of course, border security funding, which is among the bill's provisions. This one's important because it includes $46 billion for the border wall that Trump has been asking for, $4.1 billion for the Border Patrol agents, and other personnel, so of course they can better recruitment and retention money as well, and it also reimburses the costs of some of the states along the border. So all in all, it's a tax relief, and I think what it does is begin to level set really the economy, and we can get moving with a strong, aggressive pro-growth agenda.
Daniel, it's fascinating when we get into these details because what the left has done is they really have come out against this bill. They have really, and you talked about some of the things that they have painted, and they've been driving this narrative. They've been driving this narrative that this bill takes health care away from people. They've been driving the narrative that this is a tax cut for the rich, when we all know that it's the middle class tax cuts that are being that would expire at the end of the year. So they're really painting this as something negative. But you hit on some of these points. A lot of the reductions are really just a requirement, making sure that people are either applying for work, that they're looking for able-bodied individuals, not
Yes.
the most vulnerable, and not the individuals who are not able-bodied. It's the individuals who can. And a lot of this comes because during the Biden era, they expanded the definition or the universe of individuals who could qualify for this. In other words, and what that created is that the people who need it the most, right, the most vulnerable of our society, the most in need in our society, are now competing for those dollars because those dollars are limited. If we remember, one of the reasons why I think a lot of people started turning on sort of these people coming to the border and applying for asylum was because in places like liberal New York, where for so many years, the left has really painted this like anyone can come type of narrative, they started seeing that migrants were taking a lot of their benefits. They were competing. U.S. citizens in need were competing with these individuals. The same
Right.
thing happened under the Biden administration, where they expanded the universe of people who qualify. What this bill is doing is just saying, hey, let's make sure that these resources are used on the most vulnerable of our society and not expanded to individuals who can work and who haven't been trying to get work because they've been living under this, under these subsidies of the government. I mean, these narratives, in your opinion, that the left is trying to do, is it going to gain them points, or is it going to fall flat with U.S. citizens, with voters?
Oh, Waddy, maybe I'm just biased, but damn it, the Democrats always seem to be on the wrong side of the argument. These are common sense solutions. I mean, you as an elected official are responsible for taxpayer dollars. You should have a sense of responsibility about how you spend our hard-earned tax money. And so, when you're talking about efficiencies, knocking out abuses, fraudsters within Medicare, Medicaid, welfare, this should be celebrated. And instead, Democrats are going to the mat trying to defend the abuses and the fraud and the waste. It just boggles the mind, how these folks can live with themselves. And you're right, they expanded the pools to include able-bodied folks who guess what, abuse the system. But when you talk about the system, is it's taking hard-earned tax dollars that could be spent somewhere else, like you were talking about, for the folks who truly need it. Look, of course, we're going to take care of the elderly, we're going to take care of the disabled, and we're going to take care of veterans and children as a society. But we've said it before: able-bodied people, they should have a job. They should be producing in a society, and creating value. But to create a system that is going to be abused and to defend it is just irresponsible.
Yeah, and it's going to be an interesting road ahead. The bill has passed the House. It has the endorsement of President Donald Trump. It now heads to the Senate, where it's also going to face barriers, many of which we're kind of seeing in the House side. There are many, even within the Republican Party, who are debating, can we cut more? Can we make more adjustments? Can we take this further? But realizing that they also have a lot of sort of, Republicans that come from blue states. There's elections next year, so it's driving that balance. This is not the last time we're going to hear about this bill. It's not necessarily a victory lap that can be completely done by Republicans, but they're on the right track. The ones who are on the wrong track, never mind, again, seem to be Democrats. And even this week, Daniel, we heard news regarding that during the election period, Democrats, in a way to try to build the image of Joe Biden, as a way of driving sort of a narrative where he didn't have to talk to the media, where they can sort of control, what was said and what was asked, put together this town hall for then candidate Joe Biden in 2024. However, when they filmed it, when they put it together, the results were just not what they could put out on tape.
Right.
He was stumbling through the words. He wasn't able to really provide that image that they wanted. This is now coming out today at a time where books are being written. How do you see this as a play for Democrats? It's a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, man, this is the Democrats being deceitful, unethical. Um, they did a mock-up of a town hall where they invited supporters that were in on it to have Joe Biden take questions, give a speech, all, of course, deliberately planned and prepared with pauses and action and basically they created a mocked up town hall, and with the intent to hoodwink the public. Now, the event was at a high school in Biden's home state of Delaware, and was supposed to be a basis for a campaign commercial, or the kind of videos, the little hype videos that they send out to donors. And the idea, of course, was to create scenes of Biden taking off the cuff questions from voters that could be used in these ads, right? But as one of the people that were involved said, he says the man could not speak. And so what happened, what they tried to do as a workaround, that Biden was filmed with two cameras instead of one, so that the floodlines could they could use jump cuts, they call them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And make it look like it was seamless, or that he was very, very eloquent and expounding on whatever the question was with ease. But that wasn't the case, as an insider was talking about. Even with these accommodations, the videos apparently were unsalvageable. They were unusable, to quote. And in some cases, like, the heavy edits were pretty obvious, from what I understand. That the campaign staffers, the ones that did go out, actually, they regretted that they went out, because, he just could not put a whole sentence together. And so, Wadi, the whole episode really sort of underscores how far the Biden team went to cover for the Biden's cognitive decline, right, during his reelection run. And that's what I mean about it being unethical and deceitful. You knew this. You were putting a candidate forward that was an obvious decline, who could not string a sentence together. He couldn't even put a basic commercial together, and do basic activities, for a political campaign. So this puts into question the character of each one of these people that were involved in the Biden staff. How much he was protected and covered for during his time in the White House. It just boggles the mind as to how the lengths that these folks went to for the cover up.
Mm-hmm. And what we haven't heard yet, Daniel, I think it's something that's needed when someone has lied, has deceived, has engañado. It's an apology. It's saying we did this.
You're not gonna
Hey,
get it.
look, maybe they say at heart we thought we were doing something for the good of the country, and they can give an explanation, but apologize and admit it. Admit what you did. Admit that you, time after time, said he was okay. Right? People joke that they said the president was doing cartwheels and negotiating with Putin and Kim Jong Un on one side, and just ready to take on the world and be that leader. When in reality, we're talking about the leader of the president of the United States. It's not some
And we could
position
all
over
see
there in the
it, Waddy.
corner.
I mean, I don't know how many times myself, being on national television live, talking about what was visible to me, his cognitive decline, and the pushback, the blowback that I would get from the television host, or the guy I was debating, or the person I was debating on the left, that you are not seeing what your lying eyes are seeing, right? And how dare you, right? But yet, everybody saw it. It was clear to everyone, that obviously he would wander away from an interview, or take prepared questions where the answer was written down, and all he had to do was repeat it. But he couldn't even do that, right? Every time he would meander with his narratives, it was just embarrassing. Everybody saw it, but yet the media and the Biden team and the entire left with the surrogates, on television, would tell you otherwise, lying through their teeth.
Yeah.
So again, it just, gosh, when you're talking about these sort of conspiracy theories, that people, front and whatever, is that when you put something like this forward, it's easy to see why people, have suspect everything. Everything is suspicious.
Yeah, yeah, very much so, very much so. Daniel, coming out of Washington, D.C., it's very unfortunate news. Two Israeli staffers from the Embassy of Israel were murdered in Washington, D.C. They were targeted. This was not a mistake. They were not bystanders. Elias Rodriguez targeted two Jews shortly after murdering them with several rounds. The police report says he screamed "Free Palestine." This was a murder with an agenda. Daniel, again, very sad news in the middle of. We've heard so much on the topic of Israel and Hamas and the extreme in which some people have been taking it. What's your analysis? What are your thoughts on what happened in Washington, D.C.?
I was saddened by the news, and that kind of terrorism would come to our shores. Is he a Latino? The guy who was the culprit here? Gosh, I mean, it just kind of sort of puts into light, the kind of radicalism that is happening on the radical left here. It's like, and the ends justify the means kind of stuff that these people are provoking. Look, I put out on Twitter immediately that the lives of Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lachinsky must be honored by assuring this senseless act of violence that it only serves to strengthen the resolve of all those who love and support Israel, right? Who love freedom. You cannot let these people win to impose their will on you. The depraved aims of people like this, terrorists, must not be given consideration at all. And I think the violence that they unleash on innocents must not diminish our freedoms either as Americans, or undermine the right of all people to live purposeful and flourishing lives. The radical left is a festering cancer. It's pushing its followers to an endgame of violence now more than ever. I mean, just seeing it, being carried out over and over. It has like I said, it's sort of a means justify the ends mentality, and they have a blind, immoral sense that drives them to impose their will. If you cannot win an argument on the merits, if you can't advocate for your position through the power of your ideas, you're losing, and that is what is upsetting them. That when they lose, then they resort to violence, and so I can't. And another dimension to this is that when the left is given power, we saw that the Biden administration viewed American parents who testified at school boards as domestic terrorists. That's how twisted things are getting. Worried parents who show up at school boards because they want to give input on how they want their children to be educated and not indoctrinated, were listed as terrorists by the FBI. Wadi, this is just insanity, right? The universities are openly now discriminating based on race, on enrollment, and are allowing anti-Semitism to run rampant. Things are starting to feel like they're starting to lose control here, and I think the American public needs to be vocal about what it will tolerate and what it will not. It needs to be, they need to raise their voice on bad ideas and beat them down with better ideas, with good ideas. And those are American principles that we've, that are time honored and cherished. Free speech, the rule of law has to be applied here. If somebody violates, a law that injures somebody or property, they have to have the full force of the consequences of the law. Otherwise, they're going to continue to repeat them. You cannot treat one group of people one way and measure, justice, one way, and then treat a whole different other group an entirely different way. It has to be even-handed. It has to be equal, and people need to know that if they operate outside the bounds of the law, that there would be severe consequences to it. And you cannot naively think that some people have good intentions and some people have bad intentions. Anybody who violates established law has to suffer the consequences of that law. That is blind justice. And so, we're just not seeing it. And so you're seeing these people carrying out these just barbaric acts against fellow Americans. Insane. And these were good, decent people, who were actually, working for peace. I understand that part of this program was to actually working out, trying to send food to the Gaza refugees. It's like, what are you people doing? These radicals on the left. I just, anyways, it's
Daniel, you're spot on. I think your point. I want to emphasize it on that. We need to be vocal on these topics. It's important to be vocal because of this specific topic, but it's also important to be vocal because if we allow it on this issue, and some people say like, no, it's justified because of what's going on. Well, then it's gonna be justified in another place when it's going on. When someone else is killed for another cause, someone's gonna say it's justified. Let's look at what's been happening in our country these last few weeks. Look, we love the United States, and because of our love of this country, we also have to look at the flaws of it. We have to look at how there's been a group rising up that they have gone beyond freedom of speech, where they have not utilized what in this country actually is a gift that many people in other countries don't have. And it's that freedom to protest. It's that freedom to march. It's that freedom to speak up of what we believe in. Can they speak up against what they believe is wrong? Yes, of course. Can they march? Yes. But they're crossing the line. They're crossing the line in our universities. They're crossing the lines on what we saw this week with the terrorist attack of the murder of 2 individuals. And that crossing the line keeps being pushed more and more and more. It's the taking of, they're taking actions that take the freedoms of other individuals. That's not the way to push something forward, no matter the cause. I think we can all agree on that. And that's why we need to be vocal on this issue to make sure that it doesn't trickle into other issues. That's where I think the dangers, we're already in a place that's dangerous. I think it's one of the reasons why we've seen that this administration has gone to universities where it seems that a lot of these movements are starting. It's where a lot of these movements are sort of taking life and they're trickling into other parts of society. The administration specifically with Columbia, with the University of Columbia, with Harvard, with other universities. I mean, they're really going to the mat on this. The administration is not silent on this topic.
No, look, and here's the thing too, Wadi, to that point that you're making, because it's a strong one. Over the past 250 years, each time our country more faithfully applied American principles to all people, we made a steady progress, a march towards progress, and unlocked really unprecedented human flourishing. When those principles were violated, we saw our darkest hour as a country. And what I mean by violated is, when you marginalize people, when you don't give them a platform, when they're not free to speak up, and you take away their freedom of expression, well, then you're going to get uncouth results. You're going to get people who are going to protest, who are going to march, who are going to do school walkouts and things like that, right? And so when people don't feel they have a place at the table and they're invisible, you're going to have a problem. But those principles, I think, face grave threats from extreme elements across the political spectrum. And sure, on the right too, but mostly on the left, I'm seeing it, especially the indoctrination in our universities. The Marxist professors who are really imposing really bad anti-free speech ideas and that are being carried through by their students. Freedom of speech and of the press that is the press that has picked a side. Even the separation of powers is also being violated, and other constitutional norms, right, that have, I think, have pulled Americans through the most challenging times in the past, are now being ripped at the seams. And there's a lot of political figures that, instead of taking an ends justify the means approach, I think they have to give a lot of reflection as to the poison that I think that a lot of people are taking in right now, and model proper advocacy, good
Mm.
governance, to defend those American principles that have made us strong when we practice them. And I feel, and the last thing I'll say about this issue is I really strongly feel that identity politics is ripping people apart. It's an us versus them. It's for us to get ahead, you need to stay behind.
Yeah.
You win, you lose. That's what identity politics is. It's replacing one oppressor with another, or the presumption of an oppressor, and
Yeah.
now you have free license to oppress. As I hate it, I don't like it, and we should stay away from it. And we should draw closer to American principles than to distance ourselves from them.
Yeah, very much so, Daniel. We'll continue to be vocal on this topic and continue to cover the news as it develops in this space. But in another space that we continue to see news is around the cartels. This year, the Trump administration has classified them as organized terrorist groups. There's been a battle at the border. There's also been a lot of wins in the sense that there has been a reduction of individuals who are immigrating illegally into the
Massive.
United States. Much of this has to do with the messages that the Trump administration has been sending. What this means for the cartel is that business in this area has gone down, that they
So,
are not receiving those payments for human trafficking that they're used to. There's been many reports where actually it seemed like at a certain point that almost became a big part of their business. It competed almost with their drug business. But now we're seeing that because of lack of business in these areas, they're not packing their bags and going home and starting small businesses in their town. They're shifting back to drugs, to fentanyl in this area. Daniel, you live in McAllen. What are you hearing? What's your take on this news?
well, you're right about the dramatic change that we've seen at the border. Citizens are not being displaced at local hospitals. Charitable institutions are not being overrun. Um, schools can now handle the student body, and because they had to deal with this transient folks that were coming through and to enroll them in schools, and it was overwhelming the systems across the entire border area. But because of the radical, massive drop that we've seen in human trafficking, now at least it's manageable for a lot of the local municipalities. But you're right, the cartels have adapted to changing conditions. Because they're not making money on human trafficking, they are now amping up or ramping up drug trafficking activities, sex trade, all the other stuff that where they make money, the illicit activities. And it's getting more expensive to cross the border now because, of course, border agents are freer now to patrol the border areas because they're not glorified secretaries processing hundreds and thousands of migrants coming through. They can now, of course, have a steely focus on those areas, where a lot of the folks were coming through, and these are felons, folks with criminal records, who would circumvent the asylee process or checking in at the border, and then paroled into the country. So these are the worst of the migrants that are coming through, and so it's become more dangerous, Wadi. Because the money has increased in trafficking people, the migrants themselves, if they are in fear of getting caught, will resist border agents.
Mm-hmm.
And the cartel themselves are also increasing the amount of troops and units that they have, to get these dangerous folks across. It's become a very, very dangerous game for our border agents. I have 6 nephews who are in the Border Patrol, and they tell me that's exactly what's going on. So it's become riskier for these officers, who are trying to patrol, really these areas that are very complicated. The swamp, the river, the desert, and it's becoming more confrontational. Let's just put it to you that way. So, anyways, on the bright side, I think what I could say is that child migrants that were brought to Mexico's border, that experienced sexual violence, kidnapping, trafficking, and forcible recruiting by the organized crime networks, that's gone down. And that's diminished significantly as military support has intensified under the Trump administration. And we're now seeing a sharp decline also in illegal crossings and shifting dynamics across the Mexican cartels, are necessary, or have been, are now required, right? To change their tactics. But there's no question that just because the traffic has diminished, that doesn't mean that the danger to our border agents has diminished at all.
Yeah, this means that folks at DHS, like Christine Nome, the Trump administration, they're keeping an eye out on this situation as it obviously there's good news coming out, but there's also strategic shifts that the attention of these individuals need to go into focus in these specific spaces. Well, folks, this has been our episode for today. Thank you for joining. Just a reminder to subscribe. Thank you for Daniel Garza, as always, bringing those analysis on these key issues on the play-by-play on the game of politics. We'll be here. Join us for the next one. Until then, stay connected.